Doesn't strike me at all. Same reaction. Cathy Engelbert should resign as the commissioner of the WNBA. And the reason I said that, fellas, is because when a player, and Nafisha Collier is a star in the WNBA. This is not some role player. This is her, okay? Who also happens to be a vice president. You understand? Players Association.
The most striking aspect of the discussion surrounding Caitlyn Clark's potential departure from the WNBA isn't the possibility itself, but rather the rapid shift from universal certainty to a union crisis. Just moments ago, she was hailed as the league's future. Now, a labor dispute looms, making even Stephen A. sound like the voice of reason. Clearly, something significant and non-basketball related unfolded behind the scenes. The question is, what truly transpired when the league's biggest star encountered its most vocal political factions, and who truly misjudged the situation first?
The truth finally came out. Caitlyn Clark voted on by general managers, the best point guard, the best shooting guard, and the singular player they would start the franchise with. In the weird, insular WNBA, this has been a real struggle. You know the truth. And there's these people who are gatekeeping mentality. We'll tell you who's great. Colin, I was watching the WNBA long before Caitlyn Clark. Well, yeah, it's not my problem, you're social.
While it's rarely spoken aloud, the truly astonishing revelation in this entire saga isn't the early collapse of negotiations with the WNBA Players Association, nor is it merely the prospect of the league facing an impending labor conflict.
Go ahead and look. Everywhere you turn, Indiana Fever's breaking records. All Cheryl Swoops did was validate all the speculation that there's folks hating on Caitlyn Clark. That's all she did. Because to know basketball like Cheryl Swoops does, to be as accomplished as she is, to be the Hall of Famer that she is, all accolades that are well-deserved. And I'm certainly not attacking Cheryl Swoops the person, because I think she's a wonderful person.
The genuinely unsettling discovery is the sheer speed with which the entire established system spiraled into panic, the instant a single player subtly diverged from the anticipated script. For many years, the prevailing and comforting belief was that the league transcended any individual athlete.
Someone came in that everybody wants to watch, kids, everybody. You're sitting there beating it up and doing all this. All y'all become is hated. Like, have y'all not paid attention? No one is caring about anything else. You want to beat on it, they're going to hate on it. You want to talk, they're going to hate on it. Like, there comes a point where reality has to kick in. You can keep fighting the fight, and you're going to be the odd person that looks bad. Do they not know, like, when she was gone, it went back to the year before she was in the league? Yeah. Like, the view stopped.
So, just relax and go with the flow. Then, Stephen A. Smith dramatically pulled back the curtain, forcefully reminding everyone that such convenient narratives quickly unravel when money, power, and individual egos clash in a confined space. Only a few weeks prior, the storyline seemed impervious to challenge.
Attack the commission, and I say that not in any kind of derogatory way. She was talking about Cathy Engelbert directly. She revealed private conversations, you understand, with quotes from this lady, the commissioner, about what she said that came across as dismissive, as derogatory, and unappreciative of the athletes.
This represented her league. Women's basketball was finally experiencing its long-awaited moment in the spotlight. Arenas were consistently sold out, television ratings were skyrocketing, and charter flights for teams were at last becoming a reality. Everyone was collectively patting themselves on the back, believing the mission was accomplished. The league felt as though it had crossed an invisible finish line, beyond which nothing could possibly go awry. Growth was considered inevitable. Success was a certainty, and the overall atmosphere was pristine. However, the union, observing all this surging momentum, decided it was the opportune moment to ignite a spark in the middle of a literal fireworks factory. The Players Association didn't wait for the existing contract to expire. They didn't cautiously test the waters. Instead, they opted out 2 years prematurely, discarding the collective bargaining agreement as if it were an expired coupon, and marched directly into negotiations, convinced they held an unbeatable hand. From their perspective, their actions were entirely logical. Attendance figures were up, TV viewership was booming, and corporate sponsors were circling. If there was ever a time to demand increased compensation, enhanced benefits, or a greater share of profits, it was now. Profitability isn't some ancient custom here, it's brand new, still fresh, and remains heavily reliant on one very specific driving force. The union operated under the assumption that this newfound wealth was permanent, diversified, and completely immune to disruption.
Cool to watch someone like her just start just dominating. You're like, oh yeah. It's just exciting.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah, she's obviously doing amazing. Her game speaks for itself. I think my favorite part is just women's basketball, women's sports really, but women's basketball has been on the rise. Like this moment, we kind of needed something.
This is
to
that
just
moment.
Yeah, and Caitlyn's that moment. And I think a lot of it has to do with her logo threes. But you can't really talk trash on a logo three.
So a logo 3 is
Deep. That's
deep. That's almost half court.
Stephen A. essentially reminded them that this entire surge has a specific identity, a recognizable face, and a signature jump shot. Antagonizing this fundamental reality isn't courageous. It's a profound act of business negligence. While the union was preoccupied with vocal demands, advocating for equity and asserting what they perceived as collective bargaining power, Caitlyn Clark executed a far more impactful move. She became silent. There was no press tour, no dramatic public statement, no cryptic social media posts. She simply declined to participate in the next highly anticipated venture that everyone assumed she would embrace. When Unrivaled extended an invitation, offering financial incentives, equity, and a red carpet laid out by veteran players who were supposedly allies, she declined, choosing instead to play golf. That singular decision resonated louder than any protest ever could. Stephen A. didn't label it a retirement or frame it as an act of rebellion. He characterized it as something far more concerning, a quiet resignation. It was a strategic retreat designed to send a clear message without ever raising her voice. Caitlyn Clark didn't storm out. She calmly walked towards the exit, leaving the door ajar just enough to induce widespread panic about whether she might actually depart for good. This is where the union's miscalculation almost feels astonishing. Most players in the league desperately require this new CBA. They need improved salaries, better benefits, and safer travel conditions because their current circumstances are barely sustainable. This isn't an insult. It's a factual observation. For decades, players were compelled to compete year-round, traversing continents, and subjecting their bodies to immense risk merely to earn a respectable living. Wanting more isn't greed, it's a long overdue necessity. However, Caitlyn Clark operates outside this particular reality.
That golden goose per se, that rising tide that's lifting all boats. I stand by my past proclamations that there's resentment towards her because of that. But I want to take it a step further. There's also resentment towards her because she instigates resentment towards her sometimes.
He continues to bring this up in so many arguments, and I just don't get it because it has been disproven so many times. Like, please find me the multiple clips of the many times that Caitlyn Clark was doing this in the face of.
Her WNBA earnings constitute a mere fraction when compared to her extensive endorsement portfolio. Her personal brand flourishes entirely independent of the league itself. Nike, Gatorade, State Farm, Wilson, and numerous other companies didn't secure her endorsement because of a union contract. They signed her because she has a profound influence on culture. Stephen A. emphasized this point relentlessly until it became impossible to overlook. If the league were to cease operations tomorrow, most players would experience an immediate loss of income. Caitlyn Clark, however, would not. She possesses the financial security to discontinue playing professional basketball entirely and still be set for life. This fundamental difference alters everything. It is precisely at this juncture that the analogy of the golden goose becomes painfully accurate. The union desires a portion of the revenue explosion that occurred this season, yet that explosion originated from a singular source. You cannot dedicate an entire year to allowing that source to endure physical abuse on the court, be subtly criticized in the media, receive sidelong glances instead of genuine support, be conspicuously absent from Olympic discussions, despite being the sport's biggest draw, and witness media narratives that diminish her impact while simultaneously profiting from her presence. Stephen A. didn't equivocate. He explicitly labeled it as a blend of jealousy and denial, a combination that proves toxic in any professional setting, but particularly so in one that hinges on public engagement.
God gave you a person, and now you're rejecting it. Y'all should be like Caesar. I appreciate you, Caitlyn. Thank you. I can eat a little bit better. She got paid this. She get a signature shoe. Hey, I'm a 2-time MVP. I'm a champion. The fact that there's this much animosity about the person that's feeding you. And I'm gonna say it just like she's feeding y'all.
Yes.
Doors that y'all didn't do. So to be honest, shut up. Cause y'all couldn't do it. Just accept it and benefit.
The empirical data stubbornly refuses to mislead, regardless of the discomfort it might cause some individuals. Road game venues consistently sold out the moment Caitlyn Clark arrived in town. The Fever franchise began to attract larger crowds than even the reigning back-to-back champions. Television ratings surged on the nights she competed, and merchandise flew off the shelves at an unprecedented rate. Television partners didn't invest in the WNBA due to vague notions of abstract progress. They invested because a significant number of people were actively watching. When the union advocates for revenue sharing without acknowledging the specific origin of that revenue, it inadvertently alienates the very partners who are funding their prospective raises. League leadership is also not exempt from this critique. Stephen A. made that abundantly clear. Permitting a hostile environment to fester around the league's most valuable asset represents a failure so glaring it almost appears deliberate. Any competently managed business prioritizes the protection of its primary revenue generator. From a psychological standpoint, this situation presents perhaps the most significant danger to the league. By the season's conclusion, Caitlyn Clark didn't merely appear physically exhausted. She seemed profoundly emotionally depleted. Every subtle facial expression became a trending news story. Every interaction was meticulously scrutinized, and every reaction was transformed into a lengthy analytical piece. Stephen A. suggested that stepping away isn't a sign of weakness. It's a critical act of self-preservation.
Fever and mention a multitude of players, and not one of them is Caitlyn Clark, who, by the way, as a rookie, is leading the league in assists. How do you do that? I told y'all that. I've argued with the great Andrea Carter, outstanding analyst for ESPN, right here on this podcast. I've argued with Janae Ogumake, who's an outstanding basketball analyst, and Monica McNutt, one of the preeminent voices of the New York Knicks, and what she's doing with her career. They know they got my support, all love. But I'm waiting for you to say I was right. Caitlyn Clark can ball. She should have been on Team USA.
When an individual comes to the realization that they experience greater contentment outside a particular environment than within it, financial incentives cease to be the primary motivator. History offers numerous examples of athletes who chose to step away from their careers prematurely because the prevailing environment became unbearable. Barry Sanders, Calvin Johnson, and Andrew Luck all made such decisions. None of them any longer required the income, and each ultimately concluded that personal peace held greater value than ongoing debates about their legacy. Caitlyn Clark already possesses substantial wealth. If she determines that tranquility is more important than attempting to appease a league embroiled in chaos, no contract negotiation can prevent that outcome. The rejection of Unrivaled introduces an additional layer of irony, almost poetic in its nature. That league was envisioned as a solution, a domestic alternative offering players substantial earnings during the waffles, eliminating the need to play overseas. Securing Caitlyn Clark was seen as the crucial element for unlocking massive television deals. Stephen strongly implied that her decision was far from accidental. Caitlyn Clark demonstrates a more astute understanding of leverage than she is often given credit for. By withholding her participation, she unequivocally proves her immense value. Should Unrivaled falter without her involvement, it would validate every critique made by skeptics. The public's engagement is specifically for her, not merely for women's basketball as a broad, undefined concept. This truth is uncomfortable for many, yet discomfort does not alter reality. Caitlyn Clark, truly.
The Indiana Fever star was named Time Magazine's Athlete of the Year earlier this week, and she took time to acknowledge that race played a role in her success this year. Here's a passage from the article in Times Magazine, quote, "I want to say I've earned every single thing, but as a white person, there is privilege. A lot of those players in the league that have been really good have been black players. This league has been built on them. The more we can appreciate that, highlight that, talk about that. I think it's very important. I have to continue to try to change that. The more we can elevate black women,
That is poised to be a magnificent development, and the precise timing of the union's opt-out decision raises even more critical questions. Why now? Why not exercise patience? The official explanation offered is straightforward. They seek a new, operational model that accurately reflects the league's recent growth, advocating for increased pay, enhanced pensions, and improved working conditions, all seemingly reasonable demands. However, the underlying motivation is undeniably fear, a fear that this golden moment might slip away, a fear that the current surge of hype could dissipate, a fear that waiting would diminish their negotiating power. Ironically, by intentionally creating instability, they risk completely extinguishing the very momentum they seek to capitalize on. Fans, it must be acknowledged, are inherently fickle. They tune in because something feels exhilarating and compelling, not out of any moral obligation. If the league were to enter a lockout, or if games were delayed or altogether canceled, those fans would not stage protests. They would simply switch channels and move on. Stephen Smith underscored that iconic figures like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were marketed relentlessly because the NBA, at that time, desperately needed them for its survival. Fairness was a luxury that could only be addressed later. The WNBA currently finds itself in a strikingly similar pivotal moment, regardless of whether some prefer to acknowledge it. The notion that every player deserves equal recognition, irrespective of their actual impact, is not noble. It is fundamentally naive. When the union champions equal outcomes while simultaneously disregarding the individuals who are demonstrably driving the majority of the revenue, it inadvertently sends a potent message to potential sponsors that real-world impact and market dynamics are irrelevant. Sponsors typically respond to such a message by withdrawing their investment.
Do you keep bringing it up when it's also not true? And Hailey Van Lith is somebody who came out and said, Caitlyn never did this to other players. She did it to her own strength coach directed toward the bench. And it's so funny because there's actually a community note on this video on X where fans came in and said, Hailey Van Lith already cleared this up in an interview that Caitlyn Clark never did that towards her and she didn't do it toward other players also. You keep bringing up, digging up this old dirt and say that that is the reason.
Furthermore, there's a global dimension that almost no one is willing to discuss at this point. Caitlyn Clark is no longer just a national American celebrity. She has evolved into a formidable global brand. European basketball clubs would undoubtedly offer her exorbitant sums for brief exhibition tours. A worldwide tour featuring her would easily sell out major arenas in cities like London, Paris, Tokyo, and beyond. She could potentially earn more in a single month than the WNBA's entire player payroll. The WNBA, for her, represents the most convenient playing option, not her sole one. Stephen A. implied that this global appeal provides her with a potential escape route that the league cannot possibly control. If the WNBA environment becomes excessively toxic, she possesses a passport and a massive global fan base that would follow her anywhere. That alarming possibility should send shivers down the spine of anyone genuinely concerned about the league's long-term viability. Because once fans grasped this alternative, Stephen A. termed it economic suicide, and it's challenging to dispute that assessment. Television networks sign lucrative deals based on projections of Caitlyn Clark's trajectory and continued participation. If she decides to step away, or if games are halted due to disputes, those networks will not simply absorb the loss. Contracts contain specific clauses. Payments will be withheld. Suddenly, the very revenue that everyone was fiercely contending over will diminish to nothing. And of course, a revenue share of 0%.
When it comes to Caitlyn Clark, now I've taken hits because I was calling it from day one. You got people that are resentful towards her, but it's really not about her, guys. It's about what she represents. Before she ever came along, there were a lot of outstanding basketball players who happened to be black females that was doing their thing on the WNBA level. And they never got this kind of shine.
There are also subtle whispers of growing frustration among agents behind the scenes. Agents inherently understand the principle that a rising tide lifts all boats. Caitlyn Clark's unprecedented presence, brought forth endorsement opportunities to numerous players who had never previously experienced them. In just one season, her impact compelled the league to implement charter flights, a long-standing demand that decades of previous negotiations had failed to achieve. Yet the response from certain factions has not been one of gratitude, but rather a sense of entitlement. This underlying resentment feels less directed at Caitlyn Clark personally and more rooted in historical grievances. It is true that veteran players endured significant hardships so that the subsequent generation could ultimately flourish. This is, after all, how progress typically unfolds. Becoming angry at a 22-year-old because she hasn't had to withstand the exact same struggles is emotionally understandable. However, fans are emotionally invested in Caitlyn Clark herself, not in the complexities of collective bargaining drama. Ratings, jersey sales, and overall engagement unequivocally prove this point. Clark's strategic decision to hold the unrivaled card was a masterful checkmate. She effectively demonstrated her ability to remain globally relevant without needing to play basketball professionally. The same cannot be asserted for the majority of players in the league. If WNBA games cease, who will still be featured in Super Bowl commercials? Who will continue to dominate national headlines? Who will still generate substantial income without ever stepping onto a court? This profound imbalance is the quiet, inconvenient truth that everyone is attempting to circumvent.
I had no problem with her being Times Athlete of the Year. You see why I said that she should have been on Team USA? You see why I had to go off on the likes of Cheryl Swoops and others who were clearly distant and dismissive of her, no matter how much they try to deny it? There was resentment towards her, and here's why I said it was stupid. Because when she came into the WNBA, for 22 plus years, they had been flying commercial. They were begging for chartered flights. She arrives there, and 2 weeks later, they got chartered flight.
At the very core of all this swirling chaos lies a brutal, yet simple realization: Caitlyn Clark does not need the WNBA. Conversely, the WNBA desperately needs Caitlyn Clark. Stephen A. Smith did not confirm a formal resignation, but he corroborated something far more disquieting. The league is teetering on the precipice, just one poor decision away from witnessing its biggest star conclude that she is happier, wealthier, and wields more influence outside the existing system than within it. When the union opted out of the agreement, they believed they were maneuvering a powerful tank. What they failed to recall is that the league itself functions as the vehicle, and Caitlyn Clark is its indispensable engine. Engines do not engage in arguments. Caitlyn Clark has already unequivocally demonstrated that she can calmly step away without a moment's hesitation, and that fact alone should instill profound apprehension in every boardroom involved. The league's initial crash-out was loud, emotionally charged, and impulsive, but her subsequent response was composed, meticulously calculated, and utterly devastating. And history, more often than not, tends to memorialize the quiet, deliberate moves that fundamentally alter everything, rather than the clamorous ones that ultimately lead to destruction.